Have you ever felt erased by your own family? Imagine receiving a text that reads, "We're only having your sister's family this year." And instead of letting it break you, you decide to write your own guest list. That's exactly what happened to me. And what follows is the story of how I turned a heartbreaking message into the most unforgettable Thanksgiving, changing my family forever. Stick around to see how one quiet reply led to a $6 million revenge that wasn't about revenge at all. When people ask about my family, I usually say we're complicated. It's the polite version of the truth. The truth is, my parents, Diane and Robert, built a household around appearances. My older sister, Elise, was the centerpiece. The picture they wanted everyone to see. I was the afterthought, standing just outside the frame. Elise was the golden child. She had the smile that made strangers stop, the grades that earned applause, the perfect hair my mom still gushes about in old photos. I was the kid who won second place in the state science fair, holding up a ribbon while my parents were on the phone bragging about Elise making varsity cheer. I can still hear it. "Isn't she incredible? A sophomore on varsity." My mom said that while I was standing right there, ribbon still in my hand. My dad laughed, already planning to call the grandparents with the real news. That was the rhythm of my childhood. Elise's triumphs broadcast like breaking news. Mine treated like background noise. When I built a photo sorting app at 15, I was so proud I ran downstairs to show my dad. He glanced for 5 seconds, said, "That's good, Nora," and turned to tell my mom about Elise being nominated for homecoming court. By the time I was accepted into MIT, the silence was predictable. My mom's first words weren't congratulations. They were, "That's far from home, isn't it?" My dad added, "If that's what you want." They didn't come to visit once in 4 years. Not once. I watched their vacations play out online. Florida beaches, California wine tours, all with Elise and her husband Tyler in the photos. Tyler's family was everything my parents wanted to be. Successful, elegant, socially important. When Elise married him, the wedding had 8 bridesmaids in matching lilac dresses. I wasn't one of them. I spent most of the reception in the kitchen helping the catering staff because someone said they were short-handed. My mom cried when Elise danced with my dad. And no one noticed I wasn't at my assigned table. After college, I threw myself into work. I started in tech companies around Boston, learning the hard way how to survive. When I launched my first startup at 26, I thought maybe, finally, they'd be proud. Instead, when it failed, my dad said, "You're not cut out for business. Be practical like your sister." I hung up, stared at the wall, and decided I'd never ask them for help again. But not everyone saw me as invisible. Grandma Ruth did. She was the quiet force in our family. The one person who never compared me to Elise. She'd call on Sundays just to ask how I was, really doing. No pretense. No judgment. I remember her saying once, "One day you'll build something they can't ignore." She didn't know how right she'd be. I read my mother's message again that night, the glow of the phone reflecting off the dark kitchen window. "We're only having your sister's family this year." 10 simple words. But it felt like they'd been rehearsing them my entire life. I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I just set it down beside the sink, next to a plate I'd washed and never put away, like everything in this family, unfinished. I poured myself a glass of water and let the silence settle. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the loud way I used to be. The rage had gone quiet, heavy, deliberate, because somewhere between their last insult and this message, I had changed. I thought about all the versions of me they dismissed. The girl with the science fair ribbon, the college student they never visited, the woman who called asking for help and got told she wasn't cut out for business. I remembered sitting in that tiny apartment in Boston years ago, eating noodles at a desk made out of an old door. I could still hear my dad's voice echoing through the phone. "Be practical, like your sister." Maybe that's what they wanted, for me to stay small. Maybe that's why they never asked questions after I stopped sharing details about my life. Because if they didn't know, they couldn't be wrong. I walked to the window and stared at the faint skyline, the city lights stretching like a constellation of second chances. They thought I was still living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to make it. They had no idea what I'd built in the shadows of their indifference. A year earlier, I had sold my cybersecurity company for $320 million. The ink on the contract was barely dry when I bought a property in Colorado, 50 acres of land wrapped in mountains and silence. 6 bedrooms, a guest house, a view that made even the sky look expensive. It was more than a house. It was proof that I'd survived without them. I hadn't told anyone, not Grandma Ruth, not even my closest friends from MIT. I wanted to keep something that was mine alone, a life untouched by comparison. But now, looking at that text, I realized something. I wasn't the one left out. They were. I smiled faintly. Maybe this year Thanksgiving would be different. Maybe this time I'd write the guest list. The next morning, the mountains outside my window were buried under a sheet of white. The first snow of the season had come overnight, quiet, deliberate, like it knew I was planning something. I sat on the deck of my Colorado home, with a mug of coffee and my laptop open. For the first time in years, I wasn't dreading Thanksgiving. I was designing it. I opened my contacts list and started calling. "Uncle Henry," I said. "What are you doing for the holiday?" He hesitated. "Your mom said it's just immediate family this year." "Right," I answered softly. "Guess that means us too." One by one, I called everyone who had been a fixture at our old Thanksgiving dinners. Aunt Linda and her 3 kids, Aunt Carol, Uncle Stephen and Karen, even a few of my cousins who lived out of state. Every single one of them said the same thing. "Your mom told us she's keeping it small this year." By the time I hung up the last call, the pattern was clear. My parents had cut 20 relatives from the list, not because there wasn't space, but because Elise's in-laws were more impressive. Doctors, lawyers, social polish. My family had become a performance, and anyone who didn't fit the script was edited out. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the peaks turning gold in the sunrise. Then I called the one person I trusted completely. Grandma Ruth picked up on the second ring. "Nora, sweetheart." "Grandma," I said, trying not to sound too proud. "How do you feel about spending Thanksgiving in Colorado?" She laughed. "As long as I don't have to cook, I'm in." "Perfect," I said, "and bring your appetite." That afternoon, I started planning. I called a private chef from Denver, a man named Marco who'd worked at a Michelin-starred restaurant. I hired a photographer. I arranged flights, hotel rooms, and car services for 35 guests. Everyone I called sounded both shocked and delighted. Most of them hadn't seen me in years. None of them knew what I'd built. As I moved through the house, past the stone fireplace, the long dining table, the windows framing the mountains, I could almost feel the space waking up. The air hummed with a kind of quiet purpose. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming something I'd lost years ago, a sense of belonging. By the end of the week, everything was set. Flights booked, gifts wrapped, the guest rooms ready, each one holding a small personal gift, fly rods, bracelets, books. Little reminders that I'd been paying attention, even when they hadn't. That night, as I reviewed the final list, my phone lit up with a new message. It was from Elise. "Hey, just checking. What are you doing for Thanksgiving?" I smiled, typed back, "Spending it with family who actually wants me there." Thanksgiving morning arrived under a cold, perfect sky. The sun climbed over the ridgeline, stilling light across the snow and glass of my Colorado estate. Inside, the air smelled like rosemary butter and wood smoke. Marco, the chef I'd hired, was already in the kitchen, orchestrating a small army of dishes. My guests would start arriving within the hour. I stood at the window for a long time, holding a mug of coffee I wasn't drinking. For the first time in years, I felt still. No pretending. No waiting for someone else to notice me. This day was mine. The first car pulled up at 9. Uncle Stephen stepped out, holding his wife Karen's hand. They stopped on the driveway, staring up at the house like they'd stepped into another world. "Holy hell, Nora," he said when I opened the door. "This is yours." "All mine," I said, smiling. "Welcome home." Karen looked around, eyes wide. "It's beautiful. I can't believe your parents didn't want to see this." "Their loss," I said. And I meant it. Over the next 2 hours, the house filled with laughter and footsteps. Aunt Linda arrived with her kids. Aunt Carol brought a pie. Cousins hugged me at the door like they hadn't seen me in a decade. People walked through the halls, running their hands over the walls, taking pictures, gasping at the view. Even my old MIT friends, Rachel and Ethan, flew in from Boston. They whistled when they saw the guest house. By noon, everyone had settled in. Some people were helping Marco in the kitchen. Others were sitting by the fire, swapping stories. The sound of conversation echoed through the rooms. Real, unfiltered joy. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet one standing on the sidelines. I was at the center. Not because I demanded it, but because I'd built it. At 2:00, Marco carried out the turkey. The dining room glowed with candles and laughter. 2 long tables stretched end to end, draped in white linen and covered in food, roasted vegetables, ham, rolls, pies, things I couldn't even name. Everyone took their seats, and for a second, I just stood there and took it all in. I lifted my glass. "I just want to say thank you all for coming," I said. "This means more to me than you know. I wanted to spend today with people who actually want to be here." A few people murmured, cheers, glasses lifted. Uncle Henry smiled and added, "To Nora, who built all this from nothing and was kind enough to share it with us." The moment hung in the air, worn and real. I opened my mouth to reply, when a car door slammed outside. Everyone turned toward the window. A taxi was idling at the gate. The passenger door opened, and out stepped Grandma Ruth, coat buttoned, suitcase in hand, eyes sparkling like she'd just pulled off the greatest trick of her life. I ran to the door. "Grandma, you made it!" "You think I was going to miss this?" she said, hugging me tight. "I told your parents I wasn't feeling well enough to travel. Then I bought a ticket online. Figured it out all by myself, too." The room erupted in laughter. She fit right in, moving from person to person, hugging everyone, eating 2 full plates of food. The afternoon unfolded like something from a movie. Kids running outside in the snow, music playing, people gathered around the fireplace, sharing stories. When the photographer arrived, we took group photos on the back deck with the mountains behind us. Everyone was smiling so wide, it hurt to look. The photographer kept saying, "This is the happiest Thanksgiving I've ever seen." Later that evening, after dessert, I sat beside Grandma Ruth near the fire. She leaned toward me and said quietly, "You know, I'm proud of you, Nora. You didn't just survive. You made a place for everyone else to belong." My throat tightened. I wanted to say thank you, but before I could, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Then it buzzed again, and again. Notifications stacked on top of each other. Messages, calls, social media tags. I picked it up and stared. Photos from the day were flooding online. Best Thanksgiving ever at Nora's Colorado estate. Who needs Ohio when you've got the Rockies? Grateful for family that shows up. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. The final post stopped me cold. Rachel had tagged me in a group photo, everyone smiling, arms around each other, the mountains glowing in the background. The caption read, "Some people talk about family. Some people rebuild it." Then the calls started. My mother, my father, Elise. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. I silenced it once. It rang again. Rama raised an eyebrow. "Go on," she said. "See what they have to say." I answered, "Hi, Mom." Her voice came sharp and nervous. "What is going on? Why are there pictures of you hosting Thanksgiving in Colorado? Why is your grandmother there? We thought she was sick." "She was sick," I said. "Sick of your Thanksgiving plans." There was a pause. Then my dad's voice in the background. Where did you get the money for all this? I sold my company last year, I said. 320 million. The silence that followed was so long, I could hear the fireplace crackle. Then my mom whispered, Why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said evenly. Last Christmas you were too busy talking about Elise's son's piano recital. My dad's voice rose, hard and defensive. You made us look bad, Nora. Everyone's talking about this. I let out a breath. I didn't make you do anything. You uninvited half the family because they weren't good enough for Elise's in-laws. I just invited them here instead. Elise's voice came next, tight and anxious. Do you know what this looks like? Our Thanksgiving looks pathetic compared to yours. That's not my problem, I said quietly. Then another voice cut through the chaos. Grandma Ruth, standing beside me, said, Put it on speaker. I did. Mom, my dad asked, startled. You're there? Of course I'm here, she said, calm and clear. And it's about time you listen to someone other than yourselves. She took a slow breath. You've taken Nora for granted her whole life. You pushed her aside, made her feel small so you could polish Elise's crown. And now you're embarrassed because the world saw it. She didn't do this to hurt you. She did it because she wanted to spend the holiday with people who care about her. Nobody spoke. The silence on the other end was heavy. My father mumbled something that sounded like, We'll talk later, and hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, my heartbeat finally slowing. Grandma squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, she said. I don't know, I whispered. Maybe I was being petty. No, she said softly. You were being honest. There's a difference. Outside, snow had started to fall again, thick and slow. Inside, laughter picked back up. Music hummed through the speakers. Warmth filled every corner of the house. As the night faded, I looked around the room at the cousins, the aunts, the friends who'd flown across the country to be there. My phone was still buzzing somewhere on the counter, but I didn't care. I finally had what I'd been waiting for my whole life, a seat at my own table. A week passed before I answered any of their calls. By then, the snow around the estate had deepened, softening the world into silence. When I finally unlocked my phone, there were dozens of messages waiting. The first was from Elise. I've always been jealous of you. You got to choose your own path. I just did what Mom and Dad wanted. I'm sorry they hurt you because of me. I stared at her words for a long time, unsure whether to believe them. Still, it didn't sound like the sister who once told me I wasn't bridesmaid material. It sounded human. I typed back, Thanks for saying that. It was all I could manage. Then came a text from my father. Grandma was right. We were unfair. I'm proud of you, Nora. An hour later, one from my mom. The house looked beautiful in the photos. Can we come see it? I didn't reply right away. I read the messages over and over, trying to tell whether this was guilt or something closer to understanding. For days I kept the phone on my nightstand, silent. Finally, I sent a short response. Come for Christmas. Just you, Dad, and Elise. They arrived 3 weeks later. A taxi wound up the long drive through the snow, stopping at the steps. When they got out, they just stood there, heads tilted back, eyes wide, at the sight of the glass and stone against the white. My dad's voice cracked first. Nora, this is incredible. Inside, they moved slowly through the rooms, touching things like they were afraid they might break. They stopped in front of the wall where I'd framed the magazine covers. Forbes, Business Insider, articles about CyberShield. My dad traced a headline with his finger. You never told us, he said quietly. I tried, I answered. You just weren't listening. At dinner that night, the silence was gentler. My mom set her fork down and looked at both of us. We failed you, she said. We pushed Elise too hard and didn't give you what you needed. I'm sorry. My dad nodded. We can't change the past, but we want to start over. I didn't trust the moment completely, but for once, I didn't need to. Grandma Ruth raised her glass and smiled. To new beginnings, she said, and to people who finally showed up. The table clinked with quiet laughter. Snow fell outside, soft and endless. For the first time in years, the air around us felt warm. On Christmas night, after the dishes were washed and the fire burned low, I walked out onto the deck. The mountains were black against the snow, the sky full of quiet stars. Behind me, I could hear laughter, my parents and Elise playing cards with Grandma Ruth. The sound oddly easy, almost normal. I wrapped my coat tighter and smiled to myself. It wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But maybe that was okay. The girl who used to beg to be seen was gone. In her place stood a woman who built her own seat at the table and invited others to join. Family isn't who invites you first. It's who shows up when you're not needed. I took one last look at the house glowing behind me, then whispered, finally. If you've ever had to draw a line with family, I get it. It's hard, but sometimes it's the only way to protect your peace. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been there. Your stories remind me I'm not alone. And does this hit home? Hit subscribe. There's more where this came from. Because you deserve to know you're not the only one who had to rebuild their own table. The snow eventually melted, and with it, the fervor around my Thanksgiving faded from the gossip channels. But life, as always, continued to unfold in unexpected ways. That winter, after my parents returned to Ohio, Grandma Ruth stayed with me a while longer. We spent mornings on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the sun rise over the Rockies. She told me stories I'd never heard, about my grandfather's mischievous grin, about the sacrifices she'd made for her children, and about the regret she felt for ever accepting a family dynamic that let one child eclipse another. She apologized, not because she was at fault for my parents' behavior, but because she felt responsible for not speaking up sooner. Her words sank into me like warmth in cold hands. As the new year rolled in, I found myself reevaluating what I wanted from family and from my own future. The success of selling my company had given me financial security, but it was the relationships I began nurturing that gave me a sense of wealth beyond numbers. Aunt Linda called more often, not to gossip, but to share recipes she wanted me to try. Cousin Mark asked if he could bring his kids to visit Colorado in the summer. He'd never flown outside the Midwest before. I said yes to all of it. My home slowly became a hub for connection, a place where people felt welcomed, not judged by what they could bring to the table. My parents, on the other hand, began a path that surprised me. After our Christmas dinner, they returned home quiet, reflective. Weeks later, my mom texted, "We've been talking to a counselor." I blinked at the message, rereading it 3 times. Counseling was something they dismissed as nonsense when I was a teenager. I'd suggested it once after a particularly tense holiday. My dad had laughed and said, "We don't need a stranger telling us what to do." Now they were willing to listen to someone else's perspective. It felt like watching ice thaw. Over the next few months, we had conversations we'd never had. My dad admitted that his own childhood had been a web of unspoken expectations and favoritism. His father had idolized his elder brother and dismissed him as the troublemaker. In an unbroken cycle, he had imitated what he knew without thinking to question it. My mom spoke about the pressure she felt to keep up appearances, to present a perfect family to their community, and how Elise's marriage into a prestigious family became a way to validate their sacrifices. Hearing them speak vulnerably didn't erase the hurt, but it softened the edges. It reminded me that behind every villainous act is often a wounded child protecting themselves with familiar patterns. One spring afternoon, Elise and I met for coffee at a small cafe in Denver. We sat under a canopy of fairy lights, the air warm with hints of summer. She fidgeted with her cup and then said, "I always thought you were stronger than me." I laughed, actually laughed, because it was the first time she'd acknowledged me as more than an afterthought. She told me how she felt suffocated by our parents' expectations. Mom picked out my major. Dad picked out my husband. Her voice broke. I'm 32 and I don't even know what I love. There was no bitterness in my response, just an invitation. You can figure it out now. It's not too late. Our relationship didn't transform overnight, but the honesty opened a door. We began calling each other without our parents' knowledge, sharing mundane details like the books we were reading or the podcasts we discovered. She sent me a photo of a painting she'd made, colors swirling like a storm meeting sunrise. I took a painting class, she wrote. It felt like breathing. Meanwhile, Grandma Ruth became a legend in our extended family. Cousins called her the architect of the Great Thanksgiving Coup. She reveled in the attention, but she also used it as a platform to talk about communication, fairness, and the dangers of playing favorites. At one family reunion, she pulled aside Aunt Carol, who has 3 children, and said, "Don't you dare let one of them feel invisible." Carol nodded, understanding the weight of the warning. The more time I spent with Grandma Ruth, the more I realized how finite our time with loved ones is. That awareness spurred me to do something I'd thought about for years. I set up a scholarship fund in her name for girls pursuing degrees in cybersecurity and computer science. I wanted to honor the woman who had always seen my potential and help other young women feel seen in fields where they often feel invisible. We announced it at a small ceremony on her 85th birthday. She cried when she saw her name on the plaque. "I never even graduated from high school," she whispered. "And now there's a scholarship named after me." The room filled with applause, but the moment that stayed with me was the way she held my hand, her grit soft but determined. With the scholarship and the new family dynamics, I became acutely aware of how much good could come from wounds. I was determined not to repeat the mistakes of our past. The first anniversary of my Thanksgiving revolution approached, and I felt a mix of nostalgia and anxiety. Should I host again? Would it lose its meaning if it became a yearly spectacle? I worried about expectations, both mine and my family's. I called Grandma Ruth, whose advice had yet to fail me. "Thanksgiving isn't about the food or the house," she told me. "It's about the intention. If your heart is still in it, do it. If not, find another way to connect." So I did both. I hosted Thanksgiving, but with a twist. Instead of sending out formal invites, I put a note on our family group chat. "Anyone who wants a place to be is welcome. There will be food, laughter, and plenty of room." I also announced a new tradition. On the Saturday after Thanksgiving, we'd volunteer at a local shelter. "Family isn't just about sitting around a table," I wrote. "It's about showing up for each other and for those who don't have a table." The idea was met with enthusiastic responses. That year, more cousins and neighbors joined us than ever before. We served meals at the shelter, handed out warm coats, and listened to strangers' stories. A young woman approached me, tears in her eyes, and said, "My family hasn't spoken to me in years. Seeing you and your relatives together, smiling, working, reminds me that maybe one day things can get better." I hugged her and whispered, "I hope so." The following day, our Thanksgiving meal felt different. Full, yes, but infused with the awareness that our abundance was meant to be shared. Uncle Stephen carved the turkey like it was an art form. Aunt Linda's famous green bean casserole made an appearance, along with a vegan version for Cousin Jane, who had discovered her love for plant-based food. Laughter echoed through the house. Stories overlapped. No one cared if their jokes were perfect. It was chaotic and beautiful. Midway through the meal, Elise stood up and clinked her glass. The room fell silent, expecting a toast. She took a deep breath and said, "Last year, I was embarrassed. I felt like Nora was showing us up. I see now that she was showing us the way. I've spent a lot of my life trying to live up to an image. This year, I want to start living up to myself. And I want to thank Nora for teaching me that." Tears welled in her eyes. I wiped mine, overwhelmed by the honest vulnerability. The room erupted in applause. Grandma Ruth nodded approvingly. Forgiveness is not a single moment. It's a series of choices. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from my mother, I felt a small flicker of apprehension. Would this be the moment she reverted to old patterns? Sometimes it was. She'd slip and make a pointed comment about someone's appearance or ask me why I hadn't settled down yet. The first time she made a snide remark about my single status, I felt the old anger flare up. Some things never change, I thought. But then I remembered that growth isn't linear. I took a breath and calmly said, "Mom, that comment hurts. I'm happy with my life as it is." She paused, considered, and surprised me. "You're right. I'm sorry. Tell me about your latest adventure instead." Each of these small moments became bricks in a new foundation of trust. We faltered, we corrected. We learned to apologize and to accept apologies. It didn't erase the past, but it changed the present. We also set boundaries, clear, firm, and kind. When I sensed my parents slipping into comparison, I gently steered them towards celebrating both of their daughters' successes. When Elise felt pressured to attend every family event, I reminded her that saying no was allowed and respected. Through therapy, journaling, and endless conversations with friends, I learned that forgiving others doesn't mean condoning their actions. It means releasing the hold those actions have on your peace. I no longer needed my parents to validate my accomplishments for them to be real. I no longer craved being the golden child because I'd found my own golden light. One of the most profound realizations of this journey was that family is not just blood. It's chosen. It's created. In addition to nurturing relationships with my relatives, I began investing time and energy into friendships that felt like home. Rachel and Ethan, my MIT friends, became fixtures in my life. They visited often, we started a quarterly book club, and together we co-founded a mentorship program for underrepresented students in tech. Our group grew, and soon we had dozens of volunteers paired with young learners across the country. Watching these students flourish was like witnessing my own healing mirrored in someone else's success. I also found community in unexpected places. The local bookstore owner, Marianne, who recommended novels when I needed escapism. The barista, Louis, who remembered my order and once slipped me a note that said, "Your smile made my day." The hiking group that met every Saturday morning to tackle the mountain trails, where conversations ranged from surface-level banter to deep discussions about love and loss. These people became part of my tapestry, each thread woven in with intention and care. As my circle expanded, I recognized the privilege and responsibility of my wealth. I began investing in startups founded by women and people of color, using my platform to amplify voices often marginalized in tech. I partnered with nonprofits addressing digital security for domestic abuse survivors, offering free tools and consultations. Every project, every donation, every mentorship felt like a brick in a new house, one built on inclusivity and equity. In late autumn, just as the leaves turned from emerald to amber, Grandma Ruth passed away. She went peacefully, surrounded by family, her hand in mine. Her last words to me were, "Keep building, Nora. Don't let this be the peak." The house felt different without her laugh echoing through the halls. Grief, I learned, is a companion you learn to live with, not something you ever fully overcome. 2 weeks after her funeral, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was old-fashioned, her handwriting looping across the front. Inside, the letter read, "Dear Nora, if you're reading this, I'm probably somewhere drinking tea with your grandfather and telling him all about the time you hosted Thanksgiving in Colorado. I've had the privilege of watching you grow from a little girl with big eyes into a woman who commands rooms without raising her voice. I've also watched you hurt, and it hurt me too. I wish I had stood up more for you when you were small, but I hope you know I've always been cheering you on. You have a gift, not just your brilliance, but your heart. Use your success not as a shield, but as a bridge. Bring people together. And when the world tries to dim your light, remember, you don't need anyone's permission to shine. Love always, Grandma Ruth." I folded the letter and held it to my chest. Tears ran down my face, but they were a mix of sorrow and gratitude. Her words were a final instruction. Keep building, not just for myself, but for others. Years have passed since that pivotal Thanksgiving. The Colorado estate is now more than a home. It's a gathering place, a retreat, an incubator for ideas. We've hosted family reunions, writing workshops, coding boot camps, and grief retreats. Each event carries a piece of our story, a story of pain transformed into purpose. My parents have not become perfect people, but they've become more human. They still slip, but they apologize quicker. They ask about my work with genuine curiosity. They send me articles about women in tech, sometimes with a note that says, "Thought you'd like this." Elise is exploring a career in art therapy, helping others heal through creativity. She's happier than I've ever seen her. We argue sometimes, laugh often, and support each other always. Every year, around Thanksgiving, messages flood my inbox from viewers and readers who resonated with my story. People confide that they, too, were overlooked, that they built their own tables when no one offered them a seat. Some tell me they reconciled with their families. Others share that they found families in friends. A recurring thread runs through these letters: hope. They remind me that vulnerability breeds connection, and that sharing our stories can be a lifeline for someone drowning in silence. If you're still with me, it means this story touched you. It means you saw yourself in my loneliness, my triumphs, or my journey toward forgiveness. I invite you to reflect on your own narrative. Who showed up for you? Who didn't? How did you learn to show up for yourself? Maybe you're estranged from your parents. Maybe you're the parent who regrets choices you made. Maybe you're the sibling caught between comparison and connection. Wherever you are, remember that your value isn't defined by anyone else's ability to see it. You are allowed to draw boundaries. You are allowed to be honest, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You are allowed to build something beautiful out of brokenness. I'm still learning. I still stumble. There are days when my mother says something that feels like a sharp edge, and I retreat into old wounds. There are holidays when not everyone can make it, and I feel a pang of that old exclusion. But I breathe, acknowledge the feeling, and remind myself that the table I built isn't just physical. It's metaphorical. It's a promise I've made to myself and others, to create space, to embrace belonging, to never let anyone sit alone in the kitchen while the main celebration goes on. So if you've read this far, thank you. Your presence here means more than you know. Keep building your own table. Keep inviting those who need a seat. And never forget, you are not alone. Together, we can rewrite the stories we inherited. Together, we can choose kindness over ego, honesty over pretense, and love over fear.